My name is Alec Goldman. I lead branding content here at Next Health, and I'm hosting today's webinar on strategies to actually keep patients. My friend Laura Nadler, she's the founder of Working Cat Marketing, will be leading today's conversation. If you do not know Laura, she can be found speaking internationally, including at the ADA, ACP, Tufts, BU, covering all things like branding, marketing, using video in our marketing strategy. She's the author of Lights, Camera, You, a practical guide for creating and using video to market your practice. So we're very fortunate to have her here today covering strategies to actually keep patients at your practice. Laura, welcome, and thank you again for joining us. I'd love to pass the baton to you and dive right in.
Awesome, Alec. Thanks so much for having me. I always appreciate being on here with the folks from Next Health. You guys are doing great stuff in the dental space. So I know that we'll share a lot of what you do today because so much of it is about keeping patients. The first thing I want to start with is, particularly for folks who did join us last time, you may recall that I talked about how we count new patients. And that's why my title today is, Was It a Blind Date? Because very often we're taught when we take practice management courses that as soon as a new patient comes in, we sort of tick that off. It's okay, I acquired a new patient, and we set our monthly goals based on that. Maybe you want 5 new patients a month, maybe you want 20. Everyone's goal is different. But when do we actually count them? And we do have a tendency to say, okay, they walked in, they had a pulse, they showed up for that first appointment, they're a patient. But if you're on here today, you wanted to know how to keep them because you've determined that that's not really true. They may have come that first time, but then they didn't come back. They didn't do the treatment you prescribed. So I often call that first visit a blind date because they're checking you out. They're deciding, do I like you? Do I like what your practice has to offer? Did I get a good vibe here? Did you have brown shag carpeting and I ran for the hills? Whatever their reasons are, they didn't necessarily become a patient. So today we really want to talk about those things that get folks to stay. And we're going to divide that into 3 chunks. And the first is that first impression. We experience this everywhere in our lives. It's not just your dental practice. Every person you've ever met, every person who've met you, we form opinions based on that initial impression. And we can debate whether that's fair or not in this life, but we know it's human nature. We do size people up sometimes simply based on the way they looked or where we met them, the environment they were in. And folks are doing that in your practice every day when they first show up. We're also going to talk about meeting needs that your patients have, meeting their expectations, and even more importantly, exceeding those expectations. Because I think we all know if we've ever been to any sort of business and they met our expectations, I went to a restaurant, they served me a meal, I survived the meal, and I paid an adequate price for it, I'm probably not giving that restaurant a 5-star review. But if they exceeded my expectations, if the food was better than I expected, if the service was incredible and I paid my bill, then I'm probably thinking, okay, that's a 4 or 5-star review because they exceeded my expectations. And patients who stay with our practice, patients who go from new patients to raving fans, are the ones for whom we've exceeded those expectations. So let's talk a bit about those first patients coming in. And this statistic makes me insane because on average, 40% of new patients don't reappoint. Now, I know one of the folks in our chat asked a question or mentioned that one of their biggest pain points was cost. And thank you for saying that, because here we are talking about it right up front. Patient acquisition is expensive. And if we're getting folks to show up but not stay, we're literally just throwing that money away. And I don't think any of you would take $300 bills, crumple them up in your hand, and toss them out the window. But that's what's happening if we don't keep those patients. The folks at 1-800-DENTIST did a survey kind of asking folks why you stay with a practice, why you don't stay with a practice. And I think this is incredibly telling. The single most cited reason that they didn't stay with a practice was a sense of indifference. That I came to a practice and I just felt like they didn't care. I was another patient, another number, but they didn't make me feel special. They didn't make me feel like an important part of the practice, and I walked away. 70% of people said that was the biggest reason. So that's really what we need to focus on. Focus on understanding who they are as people, and doing the things that they as people want. And we're going to talk about a number of different ways where we can meet and exceed those expectations so that a sense of indifference is never a reason that a patient walks out of our practice. So a couple of things I want to bring up even before the patient comes in. And these are the things you want to make sure you're doing before they walk into the door. It's almost 2023, folks. It's less than a month away. No more paper. So I know we all used to do that thing of, oh, can you come in 15 minutes early? We're going to have you fill out your health history and your HIPAA paperwork and, your blood type and how many dogs you have and all this history we want about a patient. I hope that right now you're offering a way for patients to do that before they walk in the door, because this makes a tremendous impression. I will tell you, even in the past year, here it is, 2022, this technology is very much available. And I have had both sorts of appointments myself personally. I've had ones where I was directed to a patient portal and I was able to do everything there, upload my insurance card, tell them my whole life story. But I actually did have an appointment that gave me the come in early to fill out paperwork. Now, ironically, that was a chiropractor who I had seen in the past, and they wanted me to update health history. And I thought, gosh, really? In this day and age, that should be something I should be able to click on right there on my phone and be able to say to them, okay, this is what's changed. This is what hasn't changed, and give them that update they were looking for. So our very first impression happens before the patient even shows up. Hopefully they've had a phenomenal first phone call with your patient coordinator, and that person has sent them a link so that they can come in and they can, before they come in, fill out all of the information that you need, insurance, health history, whatever it is. That's already saying to a patient, okay, this is a high-end practice. This is a practice that gets the century we live in and understands that my time is valuable too as a patient. And I don't want to spend it sitting in your office for an extra 15 minutes filling out paperwork. I want to do that when it's good for me, when my time is most useful to take care of this. So please make sure that that's something that we're doing. Now they're actually going to walk in the door. And this is where we get to make our first impression. And I'm going to suggest that you do the same thing that they did to you before they chose you as a practice. Google them. In this day and age, virtually everyone has some sort of online presence, whether it's a Facebook page, a LinkedIn page. There's some opportunity for you to be able to see what a patient looks like before they come in the door, for you to be able to call them by name the minute you see them. And that may seem like an inconsequential thing, but I will tell you a story of an appointment I had just about 2 years ago. And I thought, my goodness, I have such a big online presence. There's no reason this should have happened. And it gets even more telling when you see who was in the office. I walk in, there are 2 other patients sitting in the reception area. They are both male. I am on time for my appointment. I walk up to the front desk and the woman looks at me and says, name? And I thought to myself, I'm pretty sure neither one of these men is named Laura. So what a strange question to ask me. Wouldn't you have assumed that the only female walking in at this time of this appointment was someone named Laura? So having the ability to say to me when I walked in, hey, Laura, welcome to the practice, would have meant the world to me, because it would have meant they had taken that extra step. We've all seen these sort of welcome boards. I think one of the places this really got started was in the veterinary industry, but it is becoming more and more prevalent in ours. And I love it. I love the idea of welcome to our new patients today and seeing my name there. Now, obviously, for HIPAA reasons, let's stick with first names only, but it's just another way to say, we were waiting for you. We're welcoming you to the practice. These are all those first impressions that change how people see us. And the next one is your practice itself. Now, you heard me joke earlier about if it's a brown shag carpet and maybe that's going to turn off a patient. Who knows? Maybe that's their style. But most importantly, I want you to make sure that your practice, especially that reception area where they first walked in, looks like the brand that you promised them through all of your marketing. And a big thing about that is what I like to call the stuff of dentistry. There's a lot of stuff we need to run our business. We've got pamphlets and brochures everywhere. And once we get back to the operatories, we've got all the tools and all the little jars of carpules and 2x2s. These are the things that typically keep patients from wanting to come to a practice. So be aware that our stuff, the stuff we stop seeing every day because it's there in front of us, are the things that are going to catch a patient's eye. The neatest possible reception area you can have, the one that looks like your brand. So if your brand is warm and homey and cozy, that's what your reception area should look like. If your brand, like this image, is sort of a high-end chic spa experience, and this happens to be a place, Prosperity Park Center for Dentistry, this is their beautiful spa-like front area. That's what you want a patient to see when they walk in, because we want them to believe in the brand that made them first show up at your practice. And let's talk about how your team does it. Every time you talk to that patient, especially when we first meet them, call them by name. It helps as we introduce them to folks in our practice, from the reception area back to hygiene or to the dental assistant, that we practice a warm handoff, that we say, Susie, I'd like you to meet Alec. His first appointment with us was today. He just finished taking care of all of his information. It's all in the system, and then we hand them off. And then as they move to the next place, maybe they come back up to the front to take care of billing or their next appointment, hand them off with the name, mention that they were a new patient, make them feel welcome and special every time you talk to them, but also when you refer them or hand them off to other folks in the practice. Again, it's just a way to make them feel that it's not a sense of indifference, it's a sense of caring. And I want you to also remember, it's all about that. So I know that when we're presenting treatment plans, and this gets into our meeting expectation, we like to diagnose. We like to say, okay, this is what you need, and it's number 30 MOD and blah, 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 blah. But what I want us to focus on are what they wanted, what they needed, and what they might have been afraid of. So let's make sure that when we present our treatment plans, we're doing this in patient-friendly terms. All of us on here right now know what a number 30 MOD is. And all of the patients look at that and say, I have no idea what number 30 MOD means, even if we put the word composite in there, because a composite means something very different to folks outside of the dental industry. So let's make sure we're careful about not using a lot of our jargon when we treatment plan for patients. Now, I know your system, whatever it is you're using in your practice, Dentrix, whatever it is going to give you a nice printed out, color-coded treatment plan. And it's lovely and it's helpful, but it's not in human terms. So let's make sure we also give them a version that's in what I like to call plain English. Whatever the language of your practice is, use the terms that our patients are going to understand. And make sure you give them one to take home. Because although you may have a patient who can say at that appointment, yes, I'm ready to move forward with this, let's schedule an appointment, we understand that in the real world, a lot of us have partners, spouses, family members who are going to need to say, hey, this is a treatment I need to do. It's going to cost X. And we want them to be able to confer with that family member so that they can confidently move forward with the treatment. And again, make sure that goes home in human, non-jargony terms. And let's remove those barriers to getting them to yes. So I know that any practice in the world out there will happily take cash, check, or credit cards. I also hope, though, that we're offering alternate ways for our patients to pay for treatment, because money is the single biggest barrier to getting treatment done. So let's offer them different options. Now, maybe your office practices an insurance plan, maybe they participate in some, maybe they don't participate in any. There's all different ways that we might do that. But whether there's insurance involved or not, there's always going to be patient out of pocket. So let's make sure we've got other ways for them to pay for it. And maybe that's a third-party financing. Maybe that's an in-office plan. You may have seen a lot of these membership and sort of in-office insurance plans happening. These are a great idea, because anything that you can do to help that patient get to yes is going to result in them more likely wanting to stay in your practice, particularly for those who don't have insurance, because they chose you out of anyone else they could have had, rather than choosing you from an insurance list. So particularly for your non-insurance patients, make sure you have other ways for them to pay. And make sure you give them the ability to do it from any time, from anywhere. So for example, a patient portal or an app that you can have them log into and pay you even when they're not standing in front of you. Because you may have talked to that patient about, say, getting started with their treatment, and they were going to do a down payment on it. And they smiled and nodded. But again, they had to take that treatment plan home and talk to that partner and decide, how much am I ready to put down? Can I do this? Now imagine they make that decision at home, and you've already given them the ability right there in the comfort of their home to make that down payment, to get started with that treatment, instead of having to call you the next day you're in, figure out how to give you a credit card over the phone, play all those little games. We are in an increasingly digital world, and we want to be able to do these things at a time that's good for us in a way that we're comfortable with. We're going to talk quite a bit about that digital aspect because it is so important to our communication. And the first place I want to mention that is in FollowUp. Now, I know everyone on here who's been to a practice management course has learned you call a patient. At the end of the day, you have that little list, and your office manager, your treatment coordinator may give you as a doctor that list of, here's who you need to call. These were our new patients today, and these were our big or surgical cases. And those are the folks you always want to follow up with. And we all learn that in Practice Management 101. But I'm going to say this to you. At the end of your day, I'm just sitting down to dinner. I love you to pieces, but I don't want to take a call from you while the food's still hot. But if you text me, I'm way more likely to respond to that. And I'm going to appreciate it more because you didn't interrupt my lifetime, my family time, just to say, hey, thanks for coming. It's a great thing to do, but let's do it in a way where patients want to receive the communication. And I know for a long time as dental practices, we sort of rejected the idea of having to market to the millennials. Well, newsflash for you folks. The oldest of millennials are over 40 right now, putting them in that target audience, the patients you most want to attract. And in fact, for those patients, for the about 40 and under group, that phone app, that thing you were going to call them on, is the 5th most used app on their phone. It's not the first thing they're reaching for because they want the ability to interact in a digital way. They're used to doing it. Whether they're getting a car through Uber or Lyft, or whether they're having food delivered, or whether they're booking a beautiful Airbnb for their next vacation, patients want to do things in a time that's comfortable for them, on a device that's comfortable for them. And let's face it, we are increasingly doing this rather than sitting down and typing or picking up a phone. It's just so much more convenient for us to be able to deal with things that are there right in our pocket. More than 3 in 5 Americans want their healthcare experience to be like that. They want to be able to schedule an appointment when they want to schedule an appointment. They want to be able to interact with the office when they want to interact with the office, not when an office is open Monday to Thursday from 7 to 3. And in order to keep these patients, in order to convert them into real patients, we need to be having this dialogue with them in the way that's most comfortable for them and in the way that they will truly respond with us. So since we know most of our patients, again, over 60%, are looking to have that experience, let's make sure we have something in the practice that lets us do that. Let's have a technology that lets us automate some of that, whether it's appointment reminders or any sort of alerts, or even asking for reviews. All of these things should land in their text messages or their inboxes at a time that works for them, so that they can respond and deal with those when they want to. I will tell you, I am one of those guilty people who wakes up in the morning and before I do anything, I pick up my phone. And I'm the worst. I scroll through Instagram because I'm one of those. And I also check my emails. It's a quiet time before I get up and do anything else where I know I can deal with anything that's a priority or anything that I'm thinking, you know what, let me just take care of this so it's not going to weigh on my head the rest of the day. And that's a wonderful time for patients. I'd be one of those to be able to take care of the things we want them to address. Maybe that's leaving a great review. You know, if I wake up in the morning good and refreshed and I'm thinking, no, I had a really good appointment yesterday, that's probably a time when I'm going to write glowingly about you, as opposed to when I drove home from my appointment with you and I hit that snarl of traffic and now I'm cranky and irritable. And even though it wasn't your fault, I'm not in the mood to leave a great review. So let's make sure we're giving them that ability to do whenever they want. Now, once they have come for that first appointment and we've shown them that they matter, that they're important, that there's no indifference in our practice, and we're communicating with them in ways that they want to be communicated with, and we're giving them perfect treatment plans that are written in languages they understand, boy, we better make it easy for them to come back in, right? Now, I know in our perfect world, every patient is going to walk up to the front desk after that first appointment and schedule their next visit. We all learned that in Practice Management 101 as well. But we also learned in reality that that doesn't always happen. It'd be great if it did, but we know folks have life. Life is a big, messy thing, and we want to help them be able to control our piece of it. So let's give them the ability to schedule that appointment even after they've left. Let's have an ability, and I know our friends here at Next Health have a phenomenal tool for this. Let's make sure they can schedule an appointment with you when it's best for them at a time that works for them. We don't know what everyone's life schedule is like, but some folks are happy and up at 2:00 in the morning because they're night owls. That may be when they're looking at their life and when they want to schedule an appointment. Pretty sure your treatment coordinator is not taking calls at 2:00 in the morning. So let's make sure the patient can do that. And also make it so that it's easy for you. I know in the early days of online scheduling, some doctors kind of panicked at it because they thought, I don't know that I want patients to just be able to plug in an appointment wherever they want to. I want to be able to have control over that. And the good news is, in almost 2023, that level of technology exists. The folks who are sponsoring us today will be able to tell you that you can customize this down to all the stuff that you want, the hours that you want, the provider they're going to schedule with, the type of treatment it's going to be. You all learned about block booking in those practice management courses. So having the ability to customize that so that when a patient does schedule the appointment that's good for them, it's also good for you, is an incredible tool to have available in your practice. I want to make sure that you use all of this technology in a way that seems more human, seems more friendly. I'm going to apologize right now that warm welcome photo is missing. Boy, do I feel unprofessional right now. But I want us to make sure that we can communicate with them in the way we want to communicate with them, but that's also good for them. So I want to make sure that when they get to the practice, they're welcomed like people. We're warm, we're engaging, we call them by name, we understand their needs. And in understanding their needs, that we're showing them that we really care, that we're saying, I get it. I may be telling you, you need number 30 MOD, but your biggest concern when you walked in was, I wish my teeth were whiter. So yes, let's diagnose the need because that does show that we care clinically, but let's also talk to them about the procedures they came in asking about because that shows them that we care about the whole person. And most importantly, let's have a way to mutually connect. Let's make sure we can reach out to those patients and reach out to them in the formats they like and make sure that they can reach back out to us and communicate the things we need and also the things that they need. I hope that this has been valuable to you. I know my friends here at Next Health will be happy to talk to you about any of the specifics in the technology we talked about. But I'm going to quickly jump back to the wonderful Alec Goldman, and I see some stuff there in the chat. So let's see if we have any questions from the folks who are on with us today.
I have 3 questions so far for you, Laura, and thank you so much. So many tactical piece of advice. The first question that came in is, lots of recommendations were made. What is the one most important recommendation that practices should really take away from the many recommendations that were made?
So I think the biggest overarching one, and I say this all the time, we like to think of patients as patients, and we separate that from people because we sometimes forget that those are the same thing. Our patients have the same wants and needs as we do. And one of the core ones is that we want to be acknowledged as a person. We all do as humans. So remember that that person walking in isn't just your 330 MOD. It is a human being who came in with a whole set of feelings, emotions, baggage, wants, needs, joys, sorrows, and acknowledging the person first will probably go further than any marketing technique you could deploy because human connection is what we're all looking for. And that's going to turn a blind date into a real patient.
Thanks, Laura. Question 2 is around metrics.
Mhm.
If you can kind of talk about what are the key metrics across the funnel. Obviously, the goal is to get a patient to actually come back and sit in the chair. But to get to that point, what are the metrics that you're thinking about and recommending to practices to really keep a tight hold of?
Yeah, so for those of you who were on the last webinar, and if you weren't, I recommend, I know there's a link there so you folks can go back and see it, but we actually looked at what that funnel looks like, where we might reach 1,000 people through the website, but it quickly funnels down through the Google search, through them actually finding you, through them calling and having that first wonderful experience with your practice coordinator. And sometimes we're only looking at a 2% from outreach, initial engagement to but sat in the chair and listened to what I had to say. So I don't want folks to feel, oh, well, I did all this outreach and I only got 2 patients. That is not a terrible metric. We in marketing, we talk a lot about what's our open rate on emails and all these sorts of things. But I most importantly don't want to practice to beat themselves up thinking I did all this and I only got 2 new patients this week who committed and they're new patients. That is not a terrible rate because they stayed. That's the most important thing. So focus on the patients who stayed, the patients who became patients of record, patients who took your treatment plan and decided to go with it. Don't worry about that 98% who didn't come in, but put things in place that help them want to engage with you. Like we talked about, the digital outreach, all of these things can help bring that percentage up for you. If it's easier to reach you, then, or if it's easier to schedule that appointment, then we can bring that 2% up by giving them the tools they need.
Right on. We had one last question.
Sure.
The question is kind of rooted in automation versus personalization. How really a practice is the people who are providing the service, and that really becomes effectively a big part of their brand. How do you view just like, does technology take away from that patient personalization and the human touch of actually providing patient care?
This is a great question. And I love this because, I've been in the dental space for a long time. And I remember at the early dental shows, the technology companies had the tiny little, I'm going to call them the cheap seats. They had those little 8x8 booths around the edge that nobody ever went to see. And now those companies have 20x20 islands in the middle of the floor. And there's good reason behind that, because the technology has come so far, because the ability to be human through technology has advanced. In the early days of patient communication through digital means, they were this sort of generic things. You signed up with whatever the company was and you picked your 10 phrases that you wanted them to send out for recare, a reminder of your appointment. The technology is in a place now that the human element can be very much a part of that communication. You can design the things that you're going to say in your various emails, whether it's asking for a review or confirming an appointment, so that the verbiage that's there is on brand for you. It speaks to your practice philosophy and your brand image and brand promise. We're not penned in by bad technology anymore. And every day I see that growing. I'm regularly amazed at the things that now look like Susie in the office literally just texted that patient 2 minutes ago, instead of that was all set up in an automation. So I'm a big fan of where automation has gone. If you dipped a toe in it 5 years ago and thought, oof, that was awful, I would suggest look at it again, see what's there now, because the ability to be human while being automated has tremendously improved. Just make sure that's the automation you're using. If you've got that old stuff from 5 years ago, it's probably not really serving you. Make sure it's speaking in your voice.
Laura, thank you. Does anybody else in the attendees, do you guys have any other questions? I guess we'll leave it at that. Well, Laura, thank you so much for providing such detailed strategies and really tactical recommendations for actually keeping patients. Everybody who joined us today, thank you for spending some time with us. I hope everyone has a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thanks.